All right, ChroNoSo, we are here mid-episode, but we are here. We're on YouTube in a simulcast, and I'm here with my good buddy Steve Bennett. Steve Bennett, quick question for you: Darren Rizzi or the Rizzler?
Well, I love the Rizzler. It's a sweet kid, a sweet paisan of mine. You know, his name is Christian. I don't know why I know that's
actually outed by
Christian Joseph. Yeah,
yep.
Yeah, it's just crazy. Look at I love Rizzy Ball. Here's the
2-0.
thing. Rizzy's in his honeymoon period, so it's hard to
2-0 is a lot. The first
Yeah.
Saints coach to ever get to 2-0 besides Sean Payton.
Right. Sean Payton was 3-0 before he lost to Carolina. So he'd have to win 2 more to break that. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go with Rizzy Ball. As much as I love that portly little 8-year-old, he's a sweet kid, and I hope the best for him. He is a 8-year-old famous for touching his face in a few different places. Yeah, exactly. I can't do it. I love his explanation when he's like, well, you hold this side. You put
oh, he's electric.
Yeah,
we're here to talk about two other electric competitors, and that is the Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan teaming together against the Genius and Mr. Perfect from Saturday night's main event in January, a week after the Royal Rumble in 1990, the first Saturday night's main event of the 90s. What's your overall feeling about Saturday night's main event as we kind of dive into the 90s, and then you take the wheel, buddy?
Yeah, no, I think this is certainly a part of my life as a wrestling fan that I remember very much, because by now I knew I was going to WrestleMania.
Oh, really? Wow. That's a cool perspective.
Right. So I knew I was 9 at this time. I wouldn't turn 10 until September. So I was, it was 1990, but my 10th birthday is not until September. So I'm a 9-year-old, just a little bit older than the Rizzler, little Italian guy just like him back in the day. And I remember this period because everything that happened in my mind was like, how is that going to affect WrestleMania? What am I going to see at WrestleMania? And I like that. One thing I love about this show is I love going back to these Saturday night's main events, because it's probably my favorite show just because it was on at 11:30. It meant staying up late. I was always with my dad on the weekend, we would always have discussions at lunch on Saturday. Would I still be awake by the second match? Because I'd be struggling, just trying to stay awake. But we were always taping in. If I fell asleep, I'd watch in the morning. But I love looking back at these. And this is one I haven't looked back at in a while. But I think the one thing I wanted to note about Saturday night's main event is if you watch 85, 86, and even into 87, they're almost in a world of their own. They don't really promote, even though, like, if you look at the one before WrestleMania 3 in 87, obviously things are happening in that to build towards WrestleMania 3, but I don't think they ever say WrestleMania 3 that night. So we're finally getting to a point here where it's more intertwined in the wrestling world in general, the way we're used to. It's been that way ever since, but in the beginning it wasn't. It was more in its own world. I don't know if that was an Ebersol thing or McMahon wanted to do that, whatever, but they're sort of away from that now. And I think what's interesting about this match and this time is, especially through a retrospective look like we're doing, I was thinking about this today. How did they do with the build compared to a year before when they're building towards the mega powers? Because it's the same sort of path, right? There's going to be a Saturday night's main event. Then there's going to be a main event. There was the thing at the Royal Rumble.
Each week on Superstars, they're touching on
this sort of similar path of events that they're going to build Hogan Warrior through that they did with Macho and Hogan. Now, Macho Hogan, I think they did start a little earlier, and I think they did from the beginning. I think from the second they put the belt on Macho Man, I think there was this idea of we're going to build towards the mega powers exploding. There's things at SummerSlam. Well, I think this build started a little bit later. I think Bruce Pritchard has talked about sort of the, Vince deciding it's time to wind it down a little bit, and their decision to sort of go this way, which we'll get to at WrestleMania. But, I thought it was interesting to look back and think that way. And there's a lot of the same beats they're hitting. I noticed in a way, like, it worked. Why not? Hogan accidentally hitting Warrior clotheslining Warrior at the Royal Rumble, similar to which would happen with Macho Man. here in this match, the tag match, Warrior returns the favor with the accidental clothesline. So I thought it was interesting watching it and thinking about it that way. They hit some of the same beats. What did you think about the way they're building this time versus last year?
Well, I think maybe like TV deals and stuff like that would help build the blueprint, and the success of the Mega Powers being the biggest story in company history, especially at that point, right? They would try to maybe look at those jump up moments within that feud and kind of lay stories in the future that way, right? And that they just had a unique situation where Hogan and Savage mix in Liz where they were at their absolute powers, and it would be kind of hard to replicate that magic. But with the building blocks, like you said, of the Saturday Night's Main Event, the early morning superstars, the main event, the Royal Rumble spot, all that stuff in 1990, it just felt like it was microwaved instead of slowly cooked with the Mega Powers, right?
Yeah.
So I felt that charisma-wise, these two, the Warrior and Hogan, kind of matched up enough, but it wasn't like peanut butter and jelly like the Macho and Hogan.
And WrestleMania 5 did unbelievable business. Like in terms of business, WrestleMania 5 was the best thing they did well into the Attitude Era. It might have even been WrestleMania 19 before like the business was eclipsed of what they did at WrestleMania 5. Obviously, or WrestleMania 5, yeah. So going into WrestleMania 6, I think they have that. Look, we just did the best thing we ever did. No need to change the formula. Let's just change.
Yeah, they just didn't have the meat and the potatoes with the Warrior and Hogan, especially. They didn't let it cook. And it was real. It was weird, right? With Macho, you had a heel. Now you have two babies. And you don't have that in what is the title or the Intercontinental title, and the titles being the prop instead of Liz in the title being the prop too. It didn't really feel like there was enough personal, gusto like you had the year before. And why would Hulk want the Intercontinental title? He's been the 3-time world champ so far, right? Or the 2-time world champ so far. Yeah, so it felt, like I said earlier, it felt a little microwaved coming in, and they had big shoes to fill with the Mega Power storyline. And I felt that maybe Warrior is, in their eyes, a potential bigger star than Macho, but in the fans' eyes, not yet.
As we had in 89, we had the Twin Towers. Today we have Mr. Perfect and the Genius. And I wanted to take a second to focus on them because these are two guys maybe we don't talk about enough. And in this match, Mr. Perfect just put on a clinic. I mean, the way
bumping like crazy.
He just bumps his ass off. And he does it in a way, too, that it's almost not too serious. Like there's a little bit of levity in the way he bumps.
It's arrogance. Yeah.
It's just there's something so great about his presence in the ring, and he really is so underrated. I think in terms of like underrated, overrated, get used too much. But I think Mr. Perfect is a classic example of someone who just the way he bumps. I think from the era I love when I think of just pure bumpers, I think of Adrian Adonis and I think of Mr. Perfect. The way that they use their bodies, the way they went into the corners, the way that they made the people wrestling them look so good. And Hogan and Warrior are perfect guys for this because he makes their power look even more powerful. And I thought he did a great job. And then with the Genius, he's just the classic, just troll heel, right? He's been
a jobber for 5 years, right?
Yeah, and he's got his moment, and this is his moment, and he never forgot it. Up until the last moments of his life, he was saying, despite what my brother and Hulk went through, I would never bite the hand that feed me. He put me in main events. My biggest moments of my career with Hulk, 2 of them, and he never forgot it. It was super. I miss Landy because he was such a great voice for the era, and he's such a great storyteller, and even though he wasn't necessarily in the middle of everything himself, because like you said, he was from the time I started watching up until this moment, suddenly, basically just a jobber and nothing more. But man, he did a great job. The rhyming he's doing with Mean Gene.
What did they show what he wrote down on the easel?
No, but in the match, he goes and gets his scroll. He's taking notes. I mean, he's just a great troll heel. As a kid, oh man, I couldn't understand why he wasn't throwing frisbees anymore. And like I was like, what happened to this guy? And he's such a dick. But he was so effective. So I wanted to at least take 1 minute because I know the majority of the discussion, I guess as it should be, is going to be about Hogan and Warrior. But man, Mr. Perfect and the Genius did a fantastic job between the bumping and the trolling
and the character and the antagonizing,
the character work. Really good. So I was impressed with that. I also wanted to talk about Jesse Ventura because he puts on a master class here as well.
I like how he stayed true to himself, where we're Perfect at the Perfect Fest, and he had Hogan, right? And then he catches the arm because he's Mr. Perfect. He wasn't ready to finish him yet. He wanted Lanny or the Genius to give a perfect moonsault, because maybe that's what he wrote on the scroll was moonsault. Yeah. Right after he hit Hulk with it mid-match to gain the momentum, he was like, "Oh shit!" He wrote moonsault, so he has to give him a perfect moonsault. And Lanny did deliver a pretty perfect moonsault. But I do like how Jesse is always in favor of the heels. But if the heels do something stupid, including to disarray them from the outcome, Jesse will get onto them. I like that about Jesse.
Yeah, and I think Jesse is really just a master class here of storytelling, just increasing the tension. You know, and Bobby Heenan is known for the moment in the barbershop, right? Where he's like, I knew these guys were okay, you know, and then he gives him the kick. I knew that would happen. Jesse lays the groundwork for that here in 1990 when Hogan and Warrior have their arms up, you know, and he's like, you know, all right, maybe they better than I thought. And then when Warrior gives the clothesline, I knew it. He's so good here. Just a masterclass of building the tension. And we're going to talk about Mike Tyson and his role at the end here. Yeah. But his work, he goes to another level even with that. Talking about he's the one guy who could handle Mike Tyson. He'll handle Tyson.
Terrible left jabs.
And there has to be some perspective because we just went through seeing a 58-year-old or 59-year-old Mike Tyson and Logan Beast or whatever YouTuber it was he was wrestling, Mr. Beast.
You combine like three guys right there, Steve.
Yeah, I don't know. Whatever.
Stay with the Rizzler.
It was one of the Rizzlers. Did he shop at Costco? The guy that Tyson fought? I don't know.
They're BJ guys.
If you measured the excitement of people of my age, if you noticed it, there's a reason. In 1990, at this moment, because the next week hasn't happened yet, right? Or 2 weeks later hasn't happened yet. Mike Tyson fights were events that you couldn't even imagine now. Like, I remember my grandfather never missed one. And watching with him when they would start the entrances for a Mike Tyson fight. It's like we paid $60 if it was on pay-per-view that night. Maybe it wasn't that much. $60 in like 2024 money, adjusted for inflation.
So but $35, yeah.
You still wanted him to finish the guy in 15 seconds. Yeah. Like, it's one of the few events that you would pay the money and say, man, I hope he kills him in the first 15 seconds. And, you know, the big fight in Atlantic City against Spinks, there was talk Spinks has never been knocked down. This is one guy who could maybe beat Tyson, and he finished him in 89 seconds. So the buzz, the energy in the arenas, the way. And if you're a wrestling guy and just think of how Hulkamania was around this time, that's how it was for Mike Tyson. He was the boxing version, and he's a huge wrestling fan. He grew up in New York and Brooklyn. He was a huge Bruno Sammartino fan.
Chief J Strombo coming up. Chief J, fucking loving Chief J. Yeah,
which we would find out when he got involved in 97, right? When he would before WrestleMania 14, 97, 98, that time frame there for 14. He talked a lot about how much he loved wrestling. But here in 1990, he's at the peak of his powers. He's an undefeated wrestler or boxer, excuse me. And this is going to be huge for them to have him involved in this build. And then, of course, he goes to the Tokyo Dome. It's 5 stars, but he does not win. And we were talking about before, to try to put it in perspective what an upset it was. I still remember that I went ice fishing that day. And we got home, we caught smelt. I've had smelt one time in my life. It was that day. We caught a bunch of smelt on Lake Erie when you could still ice fish on Lake Erie. And we were frying it at my Uncle Mike's house. He had a fryer, and we were frying smelt, and the phone rang, and someone was like, because the time zones were off,
Yeah.
So it was like a weird thing, almost like the Miracle on Ice, where the words started to trickle out, I think, before it aired on HBO. I think I'm right about that. But we got a call, and they're like, Tyson lost. I'm like, what? Yeah, Mike Tyson lost. So what was his name again? Who, who was he fighting? Who? He lost? Was unthinkable. And I read Tyson's book, and Tyson basically said, I didn't train. I was fucking and doing drugs the whole 3, 4, 5 months up to the fight. I didn't take it seriously. And he still beat him in the 8th round, by the way. If you go back and watch that fight, Mike Tyson knocked him out in the 8th round. I don't know what the ref was doing. He gave him like a 34 count to get back up. But Tyson still beat him in the 8th round. And in Tyson's one-man show, he makes that argument as well, which he's totally right. He won the fight in the 8th round, but then officially lost it in the 10th. But a stunning moment in U.S. sports. I mean, one of the...
And it even changes wrestling history leading into the main event and the WrestleMania 6, the journey we're on right now.
Because he loses, he's not available for what is really aggressively promoted.
Yeah. So he was going to be the guest. He was promoted here at the end of this Saturday night's main event to be the guest referee for the main event 2, the Macho King Randy Savage versus Hulk Hogan for the WWF Championship. And Jesse was, like you said earlier, was so great pointing out that, Mike, if you get out of line, this is the wrestling world, and I'm the toughest guy here. And he's giving like these terrible lefts, and Vince is like, those lefts are horrible. pretty much what he said. And I'm going to keep you in line in the Macho King, because Jesse loves Macho. In the Macho King's going to keep you in line too. And Hulk Hogan, you don't know you got coming to you. You know, you're not going to pull a fast one on Macho this time, and so on and so forth. Yeah, Jesse was really fantastic here.
And we'll find out when we cover the main event, maybe the next episode or 2 episodes from now, whenever it comes up, how they pivot. But they do have to pivot because Tyson gets knocked out, and it's unbelievable how quick his downfall is too. I mean, he gets knocked out here in February of 1990, and by
February 11th to be exact.
By 91 he's in prison. And I think he was in prison for 6 years before he came out. So it happens fast where he's unbeatable, top of the world, one of the biggest celebrities in the country, to being in prison in Indiana. Like, it happened really quick. So interesting to see that big moment in American sports and American culture and how it sort of played out and affected the world that we focus on here in wrestling. But I'd be interested to hear people what their other upsets, either in wrestling or in sports in general, they think is as big or bigger than that. Might be an interesting thing for the comments on YouTube or whatever.
It's definitely not Super Bowl 42 with the Giants and the Patriots. Definitely not.
That's certainly, I mean, that's an undefeated team.
We don't want to talk about it, though. We don't have time. We don't have time for that.
No. The Miracle on Ice certainly is up there. The USA beating Russia. I mean, Russia beating the USA in basketball in 1972. Again, another screw job. That's probably up in the conversation. But it's hard to think of something, because I think of things and I'm just right away, I'm like, nah.
Who's the biggest winner, the biggest favorite in the Super Bowl, or the biggest underdog in the Super Bowl to win is the Patriots at 13.5, 14 points against the Rams?
Patriots against the Rams was a big one. That was played in the Superdome, and that the Saints and the Rams were in the same division at the time. And the big controversy was the Saints were fighting with the NFL to make sure that they didn't get our locker room, because we didn't want the Rams to potentially celebrate the Super Bowl in our locker room. And they did end up the Patriots did have our locker room. And obviously the Patriots won. And I remember the pick 6. I was like falling asleep on my chair when he had it's a long weekend. I was, what was it? Well, how old was I? What year was that? 2000.
I was a sophomore. 21. I was a sophomore in high school. Freshman or sophomore.
Like 21. I think we were out till like 5 a.m. the day before. So I'm just like, it's like me and my buddies in some scumbag apartment watching that game, but there's got to be some I'm not thinking of, or ones that people think are bigger upsets than I do. So I'm thinking of stuff like the Marlins beating the Yankees in the 2003 World Series. Like, that's a big upset, but I don't think it had the impact. Mike Tyson is one of the biggest stars in the world in this moment.
Yeah.
And,
it's interesting for sure.
Yeah. So, but I think that's everything I have on my notes. Do you have anything else you want to talk about in terms of this?
Just the match, really. Hulk took the
Yeah.
heat. Hulk took the heat. The arrogance of Perfect and the Genius kind of got to them as a
Right. Warrior gets
transition.
the hot tag.
Warrior,
Gets the hot
come
tag.
on, but building up, is there anyone better to gain sympathy than Hulk Hogan and to
Yeah.
deliver a hot tag on paper to who's
Yeah.
the Ultimate Warrior should be the best hot tag in the history of hot tags just by his character, right? And I thought that it lived up to the hype to an extent. He looked vicious and ferocious and played the part. I'm not the biggest Warrior guy, but he does gain my respect in the big matches. And this was a big enough match for him to deliver a pretty decent performance. But at the end, did he trip or was Perfect out of place or
I know.
because
Yeah.
Hogan tags
I
it
noticed
back?
that. Yeah. I like
And then even Hogan's leg drop to Genius was like kind of out of whack too a little bit. It looked like it was at an obtuse angle instead of right at him.
It
So
looked like it
it just
wasn't in.
felt it was off a little bit there, the chemistry
Yeah, it
wise.
didn't look like he was in the right spot in the ring. Like it
Yeah.
didn't. But I know another
And
thing about
the Warrior falling down, that may be true too as well.
Jesse right away too, and when they start the match, why are if these guys are a tag team, why are they coming out to different songs? You know, because they start the entrance with Warrior coming out to his music, running down, and then sort of fades into Hulk's. But yeah, I thought this was good. I thought they kept it the right length. You know, it didn't, and that, you know, as our colleagues have talked about before, they came off a really good lead-in. I thought Macho Man and Duggan did a great job in their match.
Good job.
Yeah, really good in their match. I'm sure our colleague will recap that as well before us. But yeah, I thought there's some really good stuff here. Saturday Night Live, really, really a great driver of this story, and we'll see as we go forward. I think the one thing, and we touched on it, that I'm going to take for this, and I'm going to follow it as we go through here on ChroNoSo, is as they're trying to hit the beats they hit last year, how many do they hit and how many do they miss? And how close do they get? And like I said, I'm dialed in here because I know I'm, you know, weeks away from being at WrestleMania. And now I didn't know that despite being at WrestleMania, I'd be so damn far away that I wasn't actually at. It's funny, Taylor Swift is playing in Toronto right now. And so people I know are like posting their pictures from this. And, you know, it's so expensive. Nobody has a good seat. And the first thing I think of in everyone is that as good as my WrestleMania seat, or is it better or worse? Every time I've said better, and there's some bad seats. I mean, when I've been on this rant before, I'm sure we'll talk about when we get to WrestleMania 6, but I was so far away from the ring that the border patrol was like right behind me asking me my citizenship. Like I was practically back in the US. I was so far away, but we'll get there for sure. Yeah, but that's what I'm watching going forward.
We'll save it for later, but there is a very good scalper story to go along with your WrestleMania 6 tickets. But that's for the next time, Steve.
Sure. There's always good scalper stories in my life too, because I knew someone who did it as a career.
It's a hell of a career. But overall, I would say this is a good match. Gentlemen's 3 stars. Pretty good.
There. Yeah. Hit the beats. All right, that's it for me.
Steve, we're going to truck on ChroNoSo. Thanks, buddy.
Ring the bell, Ryan.
Ding, ding, ding.